The Nike Vomero 18 versus the Puma Deviate Nitro 3. Which one is the better daily trainer? Let's compare and contrast and find out. So before we get into the video, make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel. If you're already subscribed watching content, thanks so much. Love you guys a lot. Make sure you follow me on Instagram and Strava for all sorts of updates and things like that. Links are in the description below. So without further ado, let's begin. Specs for both shoes up here. And as you guys already know, or some of you may know, very different technologies across both shoes, worth noting. So this will be an interesting comparison, to say the least, but without further issue about that, we should at least still try to get it done and kind of discuss why you would pick one or the other. So we'll talk about the Puma Deviate Nitro 3 right off the rip. This was a pretty awesome shoe from the experience I've had with it. The shoe does run with a heel of about 39 millimeters, 29 in the forefoot, 10 millimeter offset, nylon plate in the shoe / carbon plate, whatever you want to refer to it as. And we do have two different stacks of foam running the duration of this shoe. We have that Nitro Elite foam running the top, and then we have the Nitro Elite compound that's a little bit more rigid, and I think a little bit thicker, just to prevent any sort of impacts from the ground from just smashing into your foot in this case. And the plate is sandwiched in between both of those compounds. We do have a pretty thin, relatively speaking, upper running the duration of the shoe, with a couple of decals that were interesting and sort of awkward on the stretch of the shoe. Not anything too crazy, but just worth noting that that was the case. And then again, we have a slightly gusseted tongue, nothing too insane to note about that. And again, I've had a really good time with the shoe. I think I ran it past 300 miles, and it has retired from my lineup since. And now as I'm just kind of like looking through the shoe, feeling it, it is quite a middle of the ground kind of shoe, despite the current market following this like max foam, like max comfort kind of supported shoe, whereas this one gives you a slightly more everyday to racer kind of balance with the plate running the duration of this shoe. Which brings us into the Vomero 18, with a foam stack of 46 in the heel, 36 in the forefoot, giving us that 10 millimeter offset through the duration of the shoe. But the most interesting piece here is we don't have a carbon plate. We do have Zoom X running the entire duration of the shoe, minus the React X compound, which is running the bottom piece here, and then the Zoom X running the top, vaguely split from the heel, as you can see there. And like I said, no carbon plate or any sort of plates like that, which means this shoe is more more for your everyday to recovery style work, just to essentially keep any sort of stresses you may have had from your harder workouts to a minimum. And as a result, the shoe does have a reputation for being a long run, slower pace type of shoe, right? And in our upper, we don't really have a gusseted tongue. We have a lot of plush, a lot of support in the heel of the shoe, in the tongue of the shoe, on the upper mesh material itself. The thing is designed for comfort more than speed, at least from my personal take of the shoe. Now, when we ask the question of which one's the better shoe, it really comes down to sort of your wants and needs, what both shoes provide, and overall which one is the most optimal for like scale of workouts, right? I would probably say in terms of comfort, the Vomero 18 wins this one. There's just a lot more plush, a lot more comfort. The foam stack to the ground is less impactful and a lot less stiff than something like the Puma Deviate Nitro 3 with the carbon plate and the two stacks of foam that are sort of running the entire duration of the shoe. Again, the power plate is super cool, but it's not a comfortable piece. Like, you kind of know what you're getting yourself into when you're running with a carbon plate and this foam stack, right? And despite all of the upper pieces here, they have like their extent of comfort, but not to the extent of the Vomero 18, right? If we're talking speed workout stuff, it's definitely going to the Deviate Nitro 3 for a couple of reasons. Not even just because of the carbon plate. I think the foam stack itself, the stacking of it is good enough where it's not so unstable while you're running because it's too high, but it's also just about in the range where it'll reflect better with a legal race day shoe, right? Because we know the specs for the race day shoe is that none of the stack pieces can exceed a 40 millimeter stack height, especially in the heel if you're like a professional athlete. So if you kind of tone it back to yourself where you're like, oh, I don't care what the stack heights are, fine. But if I'm racing in a shoe, or if I'm training in a shoe like this with a 39 millimeter heel, and then I transition into something like a Vaporfly Next% or an Alpha Fly, the specs are closer affiliated to the Deviate Nitro 3 than they would be to like the Vomero, where the stack is a lot higher. It protects you a little bit more, but then when you transition down into those slightly lower stacks with those carbon plates, they might feel a little bit stiffer and more unusual for your daily workouts. And of course, just the whole fitting of this shoe is great. Again, less material, makes it weigh a little bit less. It's good for your speed sessions when you try to push in that direction. It's not to say you couldn't do it with the Vomero 18. I know people have commented before that Connor Mantz has workout videos where he's running in the Vomero 18. And touche, it is Connor Mantz. So if you want to have an argument as to why, Connor Mantz couldn't run a 7-mile tempo workout in the Vomero 18 and then transition to a track workout where he straps on, I think it was either track spikes or the Vaporfly Next% 3. Be my guest. Like, he didn't do his track workouts in the Vomero 18. He just did the outdoor tempo run in this shoe. I think it was 7 miles. It might have been like 8. I don't remember the workout. It was somewhere in Utah, but it was a very entertaining video to watch. The guy has the most interesting running form I've ever seen, but whatever works, just saying. So that's where we're going to stand with speed workout stuff. And I think overall scaling of which shoe from recovery run, everyday tempo, everyday racer to like race day shoe, which one is the best fit? That's a really tricky question now when I'm kind of sitting here dwelling on it. Obviously, when we want to talk about recovery and everyday racing stuff, the Vomero's got that covered, right? It's got that long run distance covered as well. It doesn't have any of the speed workout sessions sort of covered, but on race day, it really becomes a game of what is your goal on race day, right? I think if we're going to be the average Joe, the race day goal is typically to do your best, to win the race, quote unquote, to have the fastest time. I don't see you getting a faster time in the Vomero 18 compared to something like the Deviate Nitro 3. But if your goal during the race day is this particular run is supposed to be a build-up or a rust buster for this other goal, different argument. You could put the Vomero 18 back into contention there. I still think in overall scaling, when it comes to race day, everyday racer, tempo work, everyday runner, and even recovery to an extent, I think the Nitro 3 has more utility overall than like the Vomero 18 in that sort of sense. Again, there is technologies in the shoe that kind of crack the shoe. They give it a slight buff, but that's just the nature of comparing these two particular products, right? The power plate, I think, allows for more speed and more options for your daily sort of workouts rather than the Vomero 18 that doesn't have this plate. Kind of limits you in terms of your overall speed compared to like, your natural sort of speed that you can push into the shoe. But I would lean that the Deviate Nitro 3 I think had more utility as a road running race day shoe than the Vomero 18 would right now. I don't know. That's kind of where I stand with it. So overall, it's possible that both shoes are kind of like an apples and oranges comparison. But if you ask me today, you ran in both shoes. I assess both of these shoes as like, thank you, don't need to run in these again. If I absolutely had to run in one of these shoes again, which one would it be? I think I would be picking the Deviate Nitro 3 just because I remember having a good time with this brand, with this particular shoe. And yeah, it just the lifespan kind of cuts short a little bit under 350 miles. And it took a pretty nasty beating, as you can see from the I guess the rubber pieces of the Puma grip portions of the shoe. But yeah, it was fun. It was just beat up too quickly, I think. So I think we'll leave it at that. So if you agree or disagree with the assessment of the Pumas or the Nike in this particular instance, let me know in the comments below. If you want to criticize the assessment, also, you are free to do that. But yeah, if you have a different experience with both, you know where to go and kind of throw that out there. But I think we'll leave it at that. So thanks again for watching. I'll see you guys in the next one.